Petunia. She's a 10-year-old mare. She's 13.3 hands. She came from their May auction with the 43 horses, and so far she's starting to really settle in. We've ridden her, we've done some groundwork with her, so I'm gonna kind of show you guys what we've done with her today. So the first thing I'm gonna show you is her with the fly spray. She hasn't started off great with it, but I'm gonna show you what the progress that she has made. And I like to just start towards the legs rather than put it on her body. Good girl. And if she were to dance away right now, I'm just gonna keep spraying until she decides to settle. When we first fly sprayed her, she didn't quite stand still like this. She danced in circles and didn't want to settle. Good girl. What a good girl. We've done some of the obstacles and work like that with her, and so far she seemed to like it. Kind of brush her off, and then I'll take you guys through the obstacle that we've done with her so far. She can be a little hard to catch outside in her pen, but when I'm working her, I try to keep her stalled or in a smaller area, so that way she can get used to being caught without having to run the whole pen. What a good girl. What a good girl. So I'll bring her out and I'll show you guys the obstacles. She hasn't been super spooky with stuff. She's been pretty settled. She can still be a little jumpy with her hind end, but we're still working on that. So I'll show you guys the bridge first. And when I like to do the bridge, I like to go over it going back towards the other horses because it gives them the feeling of wanting to go towards their herd. What a good girl. And if you can make it easier with them by just walking over it first, and then as they get better, then you can start asking them to stop and just going the same direction to start. And once they're good going that one direction, you can change the direction and go back over it the other way. So I'll bring her over it this time, this way again, and then I'll turn around and I'll go back over the other way, away from the herd. And I like to turn towards them, thinking of it as a right-hand turn because it's making them move out of my space. What a good girl. Do that again. I like that she's willingly moving. I don't have to push on her. What a good girl. What a good girl. And then I'll kind of bring her back in and I'll show you guys her riding outside too. We've brought her down the road, we've took her on the trails a little bit, and she's been really good with that. She seems to enjoy riding outside a lot more than in the ring. In the ring she kind of is lazy and doesn't want to move forward, but when you're outside, she's very willing to just walk forward or trot on the trail. Good girl. I'm gonna start with just the saddle pad. You can see she jumped a little bit. Good girl. So I'm gonna put it on from both sides. Good girl. You can see her ear, her left ear is kind of tilting towards me. She's paying attention to what I'm doing. She's listening to me, she's watching me. And you can see that she's not moving her feet so much. Good girl. She's learning to handle being afraid of something. A lot of horses want to have that flight reaction, but we want them to learn to handle the emotion of that fear and just look to you for the answer rather than run from it. What a good girl. Do the same thing with the saddle. Put it on both sides a couple times. What a good girl. Good girl. She's really started to settle with the saddling and just doing everything. And that's what we're looking for, is as they're getting work that they start to improve. She hasn't been cinchy at all. I think where she came from, she probably just did a lot of trail riding and no one put much of a foundation on her. They just kind of got on and went. And you find that a lot of people do that because they're not looking for them to necessarily be a horse that you can ride around the ring. They're looking for something just to ride down the trail in a straight line, just going forward. So it's nice when we get ones that do have a little bit of a foundation. So I like to use the full cheek because, and I think I've said this before, is that it has the same action as the halter would. So if you see the halter, how it goes up against the side of their cheek, the full cheek does the same thing, and I'll show you that guy when I put it in her mouth. So if I were to ride in like a halter or a side pull, it has the same action of pushing their face rather than pulling it. So it just pushes the sides. She's been really good to bridle. What a good girl. Good girl. Ready? Petunia. She stood really well to mount. And I like that because it was one less thing that you had to do when trying to see how she does. What a good girl. What a good girl. As you see, I really didn't have to put much pressure on her mouth to get her to stand. Good girl. And now I'll just take her out and I'll show you guys how she does. She really does enjoy being out here. We've brought her down around here alone with other horses. Like I said, down the road. And I've started doing the bridge with her riding, now that she kind of goes over it with ease on the ground. Good girl. She's not a high-headed horse. She doesn't mind keeping her head at wither level. What a good girl. She turns lightly when she's out here. Just a little bit of pressure, a little bit of your leg. Good girl. Good girl. What a good girl. So now I'm gonna start bringing her over the bridge the other way. And this is, I haven't done this yet, so this is the first time riding that I've done it. Good girl. And the tack and rider can change anything, so think if her anxiety, just with nothing on her out here, is at like a 3, 4, 5, think adding the saddle and a rider can bring it up to like a 7 or an 8 out of 10. And that's when you get the reactions from a lot of horses. That one little thing's gonna set them up to a 10 where they have that big moment. Good girl. Side pass over to the bridge. Good girl. She has a really smooth trot. Good girl. Good girl. What a good girl. She just needs a lot more miles under saddle. She has those little moments, like where she stops and gets a little stuck. So if someone's able to push her through those and get those miles on her, I think she's gonna work through all of that. What a good girl. Oh. She has good brakes. Good girl. Good girl. What a good girl. Today she's a little grouchy, but I'm just gonna keep pushing her forward and making her work through it. What a good girl. What a good girl. Oh. Good girl. So when I ask her to stop, I just like to sit. That's my first cue, and that hoe, and then if she doesn't listen to that, I just add a little bit of hand. Ooh. Good girl. So because it's hot today, I'm not gonna ride her for very long. I'm gonna show you guys her getting her first hose down today. And this is something that we haven't done before, so I don't know how she's gonna be, and it'll be interesting because you guys will see her for the first time and what I have to do to work her through that. Ready? She stands to dismount. Good girl. Ready? So how I'm gonna start introducing her to the water is I'm not gonna necessarily spray her right away, I'm gonna spray it next to her. So I'll turn the water on, just like this, and I'll keep following her with it until she stops, just like how I would with fly spray. Good girl. So she's settled right there. I'll turn it back on till she settles. Easy, 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 easy. I'm just looking for all 4 feet to stop. Good girl, just like that. Good girl. Good girl. So she's gonna learn that the pressure gets released so that water stops when she decides to settle her feet. Good girl. So as you can see, I can turn it on now, and it's less of a fight. And then as I keep going with that, I can start introducing it a little bit closer to her. And if it were worse, I can always start from over here rather than right here. But now that she's starting to settle with it right next to her, I can bring it a little bit closer. Good girl. So I'll keep going till she settles her feet. Good girl. What a good girl. Do it again. What a good girl. Good girl. What a good girl. As you can see, it's more of 1 step away sometimes rather than 5 steps away or 10 steps away. And that's what I'm looking for, is that she changes her answer. Good girl. So now I might start introducing it to her legs. And I'll hold it on until she stops. Good girl. What a good girl. Let's start again. There we go. What a good girl. There we go. So now I can hold it on a little bit longer. And as she gets good with her legs, I can start coming up her legs to her shoulder and to her back. What a good girl. As you can see, she is nervous. She's still nervous. She's not necessarily 100% relaxed, but she's giving that correct response to her feeling nervous, which is to look for me and to handle her anxiety rather than react to it. Good girl. Good girl. So she doesn't like her hind leg, so I'm gonna do the same thing. I'll hold until she stops. easy. Good girl. What a good girl. So now that she stopped, there we go. Now I can do her hind leg. Good girl. Now I can do this whole side of the body. Good girl. And now I'm gonna go to the other side, which this might completely change. She might go back to dancing in circles. She might even give a worse response if she's more nervous on this side. So we're gonna see. I'll turn it on. Good girl. She didn't go anywhere. So I'll come up to her front leg. Good girl. So, because horses' brains don't connect very well in the middle, you have to be able to do stuff on both sides. Good girl. What a good girl. So she didn't like this hind leg being touched, so I'm just gonna hold it till she stops. Good girl. I'll do it again. Good girl. What a good girl. She's learning to just handle this. Good girl. And this will carry over to other things. So if you think of it, some people work on one obstacle or one thing and the horse doesn't necessarily carry that knowledge over to the next one. If I'm just learning having her deal with her emotions and how to handle her emotions, so when she feels that emotion, she knows the reaction she should give. So that like this hose, her emotion towards the hose or the fly spray or anything like that, the bridge, any of these obstacles, she can relate that to another obstacle that she's never seen before and realize that she doesn't need to move away from it, or she doesn't need to be scared of it. She's gonna look at me like to give her that feeling for that emotion. Good girl. So I think Petunia's really come a long way in the time that she's been here. She's starting to get less nervous with people. And I think if someone can give her those miles under saddle and work with her, she can be a little spooky with her hind end, so we've been working with that. If someone's able to give her those miles, like I said, and really bring her along, I think she's gonna make a really good project for someone. She is young, so she still has a lot of life left in her. She's built very well. She is nice and little, so if someone was like a young adult that wanted to bring her along, that would be a really good home. Or a kid or a teenager, something like that, that really wanted to put that work into her. So hopefully someone watching this will want to adopt Petunia and she'll find her forever home.